Hi, all. Today we have an exciting interview with Tom Adams talking about his experience as a software tester. Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks. Thanks, Christian.
I just lost. So, Tom, you are quite the experienced tester. Can you give us a background in terms of what work you do and the certifications that you hold?
Well, I have been certified since early in 2006 um, with like foundational testing, and then I started working on my advanced testing certifications. And then I started branching out into things like uh, AI and recently, and also automation testing and other specialized ones, and then expert level test management. So it's all been building over a period of what 25 years. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, that's quite the resume of certifications and testing background. So, at your company, a few testers have been laid off, but kept you and you had to take on their responsibilities. So, what do you think made you the tester to keep as opposed to being laid off?
So something I've been hearing lately that I think I did without trying over the years was building a talent stack. So a lot of times you'll have testers that are really good at testing. You'll have some testers that really know the business really well. So a lot of times those will be business users. And then you have programmers, and sometimes programmers are just kind of thrown in and told to, do some testing or whatever. But they only know one of those things. So um, by building on all three of those, so for example, as let's say a dedicated tester, knowing the business really well, learning the business really well, that helps you in your testing, makes you more valuable. If you can program, that also makes you a better tester and gives you more insight into where the software you're testing could have problems, right? So all those things build into a talent stack that make you a more valuable member. And then in addition to that talent stack, if you start learning things like business analysis, so for example, I've had to function as a business analyst for a company for companies that didn't have business analysts because they didn't hire that as a position, but that responsibility still had to happen and somebody had to do it. And the developer wasn't going to do it. So guess what? I just learned how to do it. It was I would never I've never had that title, but I've done the role quite a bit. So if a company has to start cutting back, the first people they're going to start cutting back are those that are really just specialized, assuming they have other people that can do it, obviously. If you have somebody that's a specialist that he's the only one that does it, well, okay. But in most circumstances, if I've got a team of four and I have to cut back to three, the guy who goes is the guy who can only do one thing, right? So
Mhm.
really, today building that talent stack, I think, is really critical, not just for keeping your current job, for getting your next job.
Mhm. That's a great example of the person being laid off without that whole talent stack and that whole resume of skills they have. So, related to this, so you mentioned all these certifications you hold, and you mentioned building this talent stack and having all these different abilities over the years. And so, do you think like these certifications have made you a more valuable tester, or is it the skills you learn with the certifications, or a combination of both?
I think it's both, right? So um, it was interesting because when I first did my foundation level certification and studied for that, I knew some of that stuff, but a lot of it I didn't know, right? And some of it I'd been doing, I didn't know what it was called, but it really gave me a good, literally, it's called foundation. It does give every tester not just a solid foundation in methodology, but it also gives you a common grammar, if you will, vocabulary, so that
Mhm.
when you are communicating with, say, developers and with other testers, and management especially, it really helps you deal with that. And the other thing the foundation level does, speaking of management, it really helps you relate to management, the value that you can bring as a tester. because a lot of times people that aren't in testing, if you were to ask them, well, what do you do? What does a tester do? Well, just go in there and try to break it, right? How often have you heard that? Yeah, just go in the program and try to break it. Well,
Mhm.
that may or may not work at times, but it's certainly not a disciplined approach, and it really doesn't give you any idea of how much risk you've mitigated, for example, for a manager. So it gives you the ability to explain to a manager really what you're doing and how you can really
Mhm.
help, because the manager may not know all the things you can do to help the software development process, including, for example, sitting in on requirement sessions. You know, if you can, as a knowledgeable tester, sit in on a requirements meeting and point out where, that requirement's kind of vague. I can't really write a test case for it. How is your developer going to write code for it that's accurate? You can really contribute to preventing defects, not just finding defects.
Yeah,
And that,
I think I think that's a really great point you bring up about being able to talk to management better through having foundation, through having these other
correct.
certifications. Um, so piggybacking on that, what career advice would you give to testers who are just getting into software testing and hoping to grow their career and ultimately wanting to future-proof their job security?
Well, absolutely do whatever you have to do to get your foundation certification. Okay. And then don't be afraid, if you are a tester, don't be afraid to start working on your first advanced. Because I can tell you, for example, I do not have a degree in computer science. I've never had a degree in computer science. I have studied programming and done those kinds of things, but I don't have a computer science degree.
Mhm.
And so if someone, I have a degree, but not a computer science degree. So if an employer wants to hire me, um, how do they know the level of professionalism that I have? Well, I can present, I've got my foundation certification from an international board, and I have my advanced certifications, and those, whether or not all those skills are going to be applied to your specific department that you're going to be working in, it does show that I have applied myself and it is a profession, not just a job. Like, why do you want to test software? Well, I heard they pay a lot of money. Well, you know, while it may be true, that's not
Mhm.
exactly inspiring, you know.
Mhm.
But and so speaking of which, there's actually I have a couple of people that have talked to me about becoming software testers because for
Mhm.
one thing, a lot of testing can work from home now, and they are interested actually in working from home. And they
Mhm.
thought, well, can I do that as that? I'm like, well, yeah, I do it. And so I'm literally what I'm doing is I'm pointing them to the ISTQB Foundation syllabus, where I said, study it, study it, study it. And when you think you've got it, go take the exam, you know, because let's say you do want to get hired as an entry level tester. Okay. Well, you could just show up and say, hey, I want to test your software. But if you show up and say, by the way, I am a certified software tester, to
Mhm.
me, that gives you a definite advantage over someone just sort of walking in the door, or even let's say a person with 1 or 2 years of software testing experience but no certification,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, you make a great point that being able to show employers like, hey, I am a certified tester. I have this foundation. I know this terminology. And
Right.
so lastly, so you've mentioned foundation, you've mentioned advanced level certification. So what ISTQB certifications and ASTQB my credentials do you think would be most valuable for testers at various stages of their careers?
So again, like I've mentioned, I may have mentioned it maybe too many times, but get that foundation level
Hmm.
certification. Then you sort of have to decide, am I going to be kind of a technical sort of a a person that gets into the code and tests based on the code, or do I
Hmm.
want to stick with kind of black box behavioral testing? Okay. So if really becoming a programmer, and I really encourage people to learn to program, if that's kind of your thing and you feel good about it, then I would start looking at the technical tester and the automation testing certifications, but do get the certifications. On the other side, then you could possibly work as test management If you get your advanced test manager, then that's going to set you up to have more skills in terms of leading a team. So I'm a certified test manager. Well, you could certainly be a team lead, and that'll teach you some skills that you could do there. Um, and then finally, if you really just want to be, a manual tester straight on, then do get your advanced. But I recommend really everyone get the advanced test manager
Hmm.
because one, it's not that hard. If you just study the book and you know how to study for it, and you
Hmm.
learn the skills, you can pass the test. That's the whole point of
Hmm.
the test. The test is not how difficult can we make it. The test is just have you studied the book and do you understand the concepts and can you use them in real life? And if
Hmm.
you can do that, then you're going to pass the test. So don't be paranoid or anything. Um, but the other thing to go back to, if I could just retreat back to one earlier point, the
Hmm.
vocabulary is very important. Knowing the terminology and the concepts so that when you talk about it, you actually can present yourself as a professional, as knowledgeable, and then you're able to communicate what should what should be done and what can be accomplished with the testing mission.
I think those are some great points, especially the way that you explained it, where you want to go with your career. Do you want to do programming? Do you want to be a test manager? I think that people also hearing that the advanced test management isn't this incredibly daunting, super challenging exam will be quite great to hear.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I can look at myself, right? So I had
Hmm.
my foundation. I've been testing for a long time, and I asked my manager, I really want to I want to take this advanced testing class so I can get that certification. He looked at me, and goes, "Oh, you could pass that without taking the class." He goes, "But I'll send you anyway." And the truth was, because I had been doing it for quite a while, yeah, I did. And it really wasn't a problem. And I probably could have only because I'd been doing it, for so long. And
Hmm.
so it wasn't really that hard. So
Yeah.
yeah, don't get, but I was paranoid because first of all, my manager is going to pay for me to go to this class and take the test. If I
Hmm.
fail that test, I'm like, whatever. And the truth is, it was not that hard as long as you study and you learn it. So don't be paranoid. Don't be afraid. It's not that.
Well,
Now, it
thank
is hard if you don't study, you don't know your material. Don't get me wrong. So you do need to study. But if you know
Yeah.
your material, the test just shows I know my material.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tom. I'm sure these points will be very insightful. Do you have any last bits of advice for testers out there or aspiring testers?
Yes, testing is a wonderful profession, and you are actually helping people every day by keeping really bad software from ruining their lives. So thank you very much.
That's a great point. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.